And then the air and naval part of the tech tree is also visible in a bit of a preview. This is obviously a little less complete than the armored one, but it still doesn't make any sense. Now, why on Earth would there be a Luftwaffe, Soviet Air Force, the Военно-воздушные силы, and then the French Air Force de l'Armée de l'Air? Why would these be in the game but not the US Air Force and the British Air Force, which were much bigger, much more heavily organized, and they overall performed better in the war? There is no reason for that to be in the game. Then there is also no reason for just the Air Force to be like this in the game. If we go to the normal Air Force tech tree, I don't see anything wrong with this one. I mean, it is more simple than in some other Hearts of Iron games, but why would there be a unique tech tree for every major country? It just baffles me. There's no reason for this to be in the game. It's just unnecessarily complicated. Then you go into the ships. This is obviously even less done than the tanks. And obviously, because it's even less done, it makes even less sense. Now, if we go to... we're in the Soviet tech tree, so it's probably less done than something like the American one. I'm actually going to tack switch to America later. There is a little folder over here called the Legacy Ships folder, which is obviously meant to be World War I ships. So there is one carrier, World War I carrier, probably something like the Hermes class from the British, or the Hosho from the Japanese, and something called a World War I submarine, which doesn't make any sense because there was probably much more development of submarines during World War I than there was for example, battle cruisers or even armored cruisers. And then you have dreadnoughts, and for some reason there is a World War I dreadnought tech. And then when you go to the tech tree, the first one in the Soviet tree is the Marat class, or the Marat, which is a World War I battleship. Why? What is this? Let's actually tag switch the Americans. I haven't actually checked this before to see if their tech tree, which obviously is supposed to have a lot more detail in terms of the naval, is any better, because I'm sincerely hoping that it is. Nope. Lexington class and New York class, both obviously World War I vessels. I literally don't. It doesn't make any sense. I haven't even checked the stats. Because I don't want to. There is no reason for me to want to do that, because that would just be masochism. Also, one good thing about the mod, so you don't say that I'm only talking about negatives, is the fact that despite the fact that there is a huge amount of increased researches, because as you can see there's a lot more text, they had the decency to increase the tech slots. Now, I'm not sure if this is for miners as well, so let's actually switch to a miner. Oh, that's not a miner. I wanted to go for another tag. This one. So let's go for a European miner and see how many tech slots they have. No, of course they haven't. Why would they? And then we go to a non-European miner, and it's probably going to be 2. Yep. So only for the majors was there any attention devolved, which doesn't surprise me at all, despite the fact that there's a lot of overhaul mods which incredibly improve miners. For example, the Nationalism Extended mod, and even August Storm improves miners quite dramatically in terms of their, in general, effectiveness and usefulness. So we had the vehicle trees. Now let's actually go to the artillery. There's, for some reason, horse artillery transports, which it doesn't make any sense for there to be both transports and artillery pieces of equipment. And the reason for that is simply that in the normal artillery in-game, obviously it just assumes that you're going to have transports, and then for the truck-based transports, there's mods called, for example, the motorized artillery, or D-Day's common units of World War II, that have motorized artillery units that require both trucks and artillery. And again, horses are abstracted, just like in the normal game, because there's no reason for there to be a horse equipment. It just does not make any sense. Also, why is the horse reliable? Why is the horse reliable? What? It does not make any sense. Okay. And then you look at the fact that there's coastal artillery, which absolutely does not make any sense. There is no reason for there to be a coastal artillery. It's normally already part of coastal batteries. Not coastal batteries. I can't even speak because of how insanely stupid this is. Coastal fortifications. Coastal artillery is part of that. So why would there be a coastal artillery regiment, battery? I'm not even sure as to what the purpose of this unit is. It seems to increase your attack against forts and decreases movement. Why? What is the reason for these stats? There is none. And then there's railway artillery, which is also in some other mods, and that's fine. Then there is the obvious light, medium, and heavy artillery, which is okay. It's also in other mods. It's not that big of a deal. I'm not going to even talk about it. The land doctrines are the same, which at least it's something that all of the doctrines are the same, which is at least something decent. Then you have the industry. What is this? Now, I'm going to tell you what this is. Obviously, tank workshops, truck workshops, artillery workshops, small arms workshops, uniform, munitions, fighter, bomber, ship, submarine. Which would be a fine and interesting addition to the game if it remained like the tier 1 tech of it. Unfortunately, from the tier 2 onward, it enables the buildings of all these factories, which doesn't make any sense because normally all of these are either military factories or dockyards. And I see really no reason to actually swap that out because, I mean, industry is already hard enough to simulate. Like, the AI is already bad enough at managing production with 2 types of factories that if you don't, give it the option to build all these factories, which I'm not even sure what they do because there is no tooltip explaining what they do. I'm guessing they increase the production of the singular actual pieces of equipment, which obviously they're dedicated to. For example, munitions factory is probably going to increase the production of infantry equipment of some kind, or I don't know, let's actually go to production. Maybe there is something that actually garrison maintenance, infantry equipment, artillery maybe? Yeah, or maybe even AT guns in terms of, obviously they have to have munitions being produced. Maybe they increase those, but I have no idea because there is no tooltip, and this is supposed to be a finished version, okay? This is what really pisses me off. And then you have, tank factories, aircraft factories, for all kinds. And I've already stated why it makes no sense for them to be in the game, because they are already in the game. They're just called military factories. And the problem is, it's not like they replaced the military factories with another type of system wherein, okay, you have arms factories that can only produce equipment, and then you cannot assign them to another type of equipment production. So, for example, you have arms factories that cannot be assigned to produce tanks, which would have been already quite heavily in terms of the micromanagement, but it would have also made sense because of the fact that, yeah, it's more realistic. However, in this regard, it's neither realistic nor functional. So what is the point? You have to either be realistic or functional / fun. It does not make any sense to have both, or sort of a, middle of the line. Then there is a lot of equipment that just does not make any sense for it to be in the game. Small liaison vehicles. This is normally support equipment. Look, they haven't even changed the text that explains why support equipment essentially abstracts all these other types of equipment. Radios, jeeps, pontoons, and other equipment used to support troops. So why is there, for example, HQ equipment? Basic equipment such as radios, maps, and command post equipment. Can you tell me what the difference is between these two? That this is more specialized, obviously, so the production cost is less. But why would it be separate? It's already this, plus all these other things, already in support equipment. It does not make any sense for it to be different. Then there is, for example, prime mover equipment for artillery, why would it be different from motorized transport? I mean, it even uses similar resources, as you can see. It's slightly more expensive than heavy truck equipment. Oh no. That's worth spending effort, because these modders went through a huge amount of effort to make this. It's pretty clear. I'm not sure how many man-hours they sank into this thing. I'm not sure how big their team is, but since it is a fairly famous mod from Hearts of Iron 3, I'm guessing that they have a much bigger team than some other mods, which have made a much more sound sort of development plan, because I don't think they have even made a plan in the making of this mod, and they've executed it, and the product makes more sense. Despite the fact that it was obviously less sort of intensive to make. It required less manpower, it required less labor on the part of that manpower. So it also wasted less time of the modders, just to put it into a much more simple perspective. And also, the insane thing is that all of this doesn't make the game more historically accurate, because as I said, it does not matter whether or not you're producing tank factories, because it's not like you're going to be able to have sort of specialized production lines with tank factories and then other ones with small arms factories, because it's probably not even possible with the game engine. It's not possible to actually have the AI work efficiently under this system. It's already bad enough, the AI, that it cannot produce in this system. For example, if you're looking for a mod that actually makes the production more historically accurate, there is a mod called Literally Historically Accurate and Balanced. What does it do? It's very, very simple, and yet it increases the historical accuracy of the game 100-fold. Essentially, it gives the historical production levels of the big majors to them, instead of having an abstracted, sort of balanced, quote-unquote, approach that Hearts of Iron normally does. For example, the USA has about 150 factories at the start, whereas the Soviet Union has 90, the Germans have something like 90 as well, 80/90. The US starts with something like 300 civilian factories, because that's the proportion that they were producing comparatively to whatever number they buffed the Soviet Union to. And then they nerfed Germany a little bit, buffed Britain a little bit, and what that does is it makes certain that the production outputs of all of the majors are sort of a little bit more historical from 1936. And why is that important? Because obviously the most important thing about World War II wasn't how good your tank was. Let's actually go and have stats for individual tanks for every major country for whatever reason. No, what was important was your production output, because the US produced so much more than everyone else combined that they were able to simply flood, even from a position where they had to cross two huge oceans to actually fight. They were able to actually have a superior logistic system to the Germans, to the Italians, even to the Soviets, etc., etc. Why? Because they had a much better production system. Why were the Soviets able to outproduce Germany, even though they had less resources after 1941, after half of their country was occupied, with something like 90% of their steel production in the West? Why were the Soviets still able to outproduce the Germans? Because they had a much better industrial system. They had a much better production. And that is simply the gist of Black Ice. It's a bit like Germany in World War II. It doesn't matter how much effort you put into something. It doesn't matter that your tank, your Tiger, takes 3 or 4 times as much man-hours to produce as the T-34. What matters is that the T-34 can win a war because it's a good tank. It can move a lot further. It doesn't waste production time on useless things, because it's going to get destroyed in battle anyway. And then you can produce 50 times as many T-34s as you can Tigers. You can produce something like 10 times as many T-34s as you can Panzer IVs. 2 times as many T-34s as you can Stugs. Well, that's more like 2.5 times as many. And then you win the war, because also you can have a much better production system that goes behind it. And it's pretty clear that while Black Ice obviously has a lot of even love, perhaps, and a lot of effort put into it by probably a lot of people, all of this effort is wasted. And that's also something that really pisses me off. Not only the fact that this is praised so much that it eclipses other and better mods, but also the fact that all these people that worked on this could have done a lot better if they just had a plan, if they were just organized well, if they had in mind what they were going to add, why they were going to add it, because they just added a bunch of things for no reason, just to add them. And if they were integrated into mod teams that clearly knew what they were doing, because clearly the Black Ice mod team knows what it's doing in terms of the working and adding things, but it does not know how it's supposed to operate in terms of a bigger development plan. And that's why you have some mods such as August Storm, or even the Fox and the Lion, which is also a pretty complicated mod, but it is also a pretty finished mod that makes in some way sense. You have, for example, also D-Day common units of World War II, which doesn't have as big of a scope as Black Ice, but has much better, and I'm speaking slowly because I'm just dumbfounded, it has a much better system put in place to actually implement the fewer but better changes. It just focuses on certain things, and it just does not make any sense to have a mod like this. And it's sad that so much effort was wasted onto something like this, because the AI probably does not know how to handle this. A player will have trouble handling this because there's no reason for the game to be this complicated. And it's just sad. Also, whoa, I was even forgetting something. Let's go to the Army tab, to the Generals. Even more nonsense. Mindless General, for example, over here. Or over here, Ivan Konyev, awesome General. Wasn't that already represented by skill? This is an even better, actually, representation of what I'm talking about. Because with the equipment, with all of the things that could have been just left into support equipment, but they were, for some reason, put into a different area, that really could have been excusable by, oh, they just didn't read the description of support equipment and they just assumed there was something else. You can even make that kind of excuse, which for a modder still does not make any sense, because a modder is supposed to know the game inside and out. But this is even more inexcusable, because it's just spelled out for you. Having higher skill than the enemy general gives the leader an extra chance to pick a counterattack to beat the enemy, and then you can look under and it increases the attack and defense stats. But then they decided to actually add a trait to increase your attack and defense stat on top of the skill. That is not even negligence of not reading the description. That is a negligence of probably even not playing the game, which is sad, because you're modding the game, you're supposed to know it, you're supposed to like it, you're supposed to love it, because you're sinking your work into it for free. And it just does not make any sense that you were modding a game that you clearly don't play, because I don't think the mod team plays this game, because if they had, they would know that some of the things they added don't make any sense.